Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Return to the Realm, a rereaders podcast of the Realm of the Elderlings series by Rob and Hobb. I'm Kayiu/Anand, and I'm here with Alex and Leah, and today we're going to be reading chapters 16 through 20 of Assassin's Quest. Um, in this section, Fitz continues his journey to the mountains and finally gets there, but not before being captured by Regal's forces again and being forced into a harrowing escape. Um, and before we get into like the actual meat and potatoes of this chapter, um, remember that this is a rereaders podcast, not just for this trilogy, but also all books in the series. So, if you haven't read all 16 books in the Realm of the Elderling series, be warned we will have spoilers for them. And if you don't want those, go back, finish reading them, come back and listen to us. If you've already read all of them, glad to have you. Okay. Um, so let's get into it. Chapter 16, Bolthole. Um, this is another pretty slow chapter, and it has the caravan that Fitz is with travel to the titular Bolthole, where Nick essentially had Nick, who the smuggler is helping them escape, has like a little like nook and cranny for them to hide in as like a halfway point to their journey. Um, we get to have like lots of like little conversation moments with Kettle and Starling that kind of make up the like meat of this chapter. Yeah. I forgot how much like I appreciated having Nighteyes back. It's like the chapters with just Fitz. I didn't realize like how much I was just like bogged down until having Nighteyes back, and Nighteyes just like unfailingly realistic, but also is the type of realistic where it's like cup half full rather than cup half empty. Where it's like yeah,
Definitely.
like the part where it really clicked for me was where Fitz was like, yeah, Birch is taking care of Molly, and then Nidus is like, ah, cool, okay, everything's cool then. That guy knows the meaning of pack, even though he doesn't say it. He does it.
I know, I loved that he was so quickly put at ease when he found out that Birch was the one who's, like, taking care of Molly.
Mm.
Although it did make me think about how that conversation between like Fitz and Nighteyes made me think about how Fitz just kind of takes it for granted that Birch is gonna watch over Molly and Nettle. Like it's not Birch's responsibility at all. He could just wash his hands clean and be like, I'm done raising farseers. They keep fucking me over. And he doesn't, obviously, because he's Birch and he wouldn't. But like Fitz doesn't even have a moment where he's like, oh, Birch could be living his own life, and instead he'll just watch over my people until I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what their last fight was about, too. Before Birch was like, okay, I need to leave you on your own. Fitz, like, really dug into him and was like, you wasted your life, like, raising me. And that's kind of what he's doing again.
Mm-hmm. And
Sort
Fitz
of.
just expects it of him. He doesn't even like take a second to appreciate that he's doing it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting though is that like yes, all of that, but also like Birch would just not be himself if he's not doing this out of just out of a sense of obligation. He genuinely cares about these people, and I think that's kind of like the little like missing part from like Fitz's thing because Fitz does a lot of things because he feels like obligated to or he feels like it's the right thing to do. Even when he cares about King Shrewd, it eventually just like even after that evaporates, he's like, he's my king, I gotta keep helping him out. But Birch genuinely just like loves the people in his life. And I think that's like he cares about Molly because she was like helping him out before and like even as an extension of Fitz. So Birch definitely deserves to like have that self determination, but I think he has it right now. I think this is where he would want to be. I think the only difference is if he knew that Fitz was going to Verity and like knew that he could do something, he would be off to help his king because he's just as much of a stickler for the throne as Fitz is.
But do you think that after helping Molly give birth, he would have left her to go aid Verity, or would he have stayed with Molly and Nettle? Because I feel like if Birch knew that Fitz was alive and going to Verity, he would probably also know that Regal is sending people to look for Molly, so he would know that she's in danger.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder which obligation would hold more weight for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like I think it would come down to how much he trusts Chade. Because he knowing Chade is there, he might, but like he doesn't really trust Chade that much, so I don't know.
And he would try and get Molly and Nettle back into like Buckkeep or something. Like, no.
Yeah, I think that Burge would like end up staying with Molly and Nettle, but he would just be more tormented about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because right now it's like, well, I have nothing else left to me in life but this one purpose, and then it's like conflicting purpose. Oh no, I have to make choices. Um, okay, I will freely admit that like I've been trying to find like charitable interpretations of like Starling's activities or like just the way Starling behaves because I think that while she does end up becoming like the character we all know and hate, um, I feel like I wonder how much of like at least my perspective is being clouded by knowing that. So I'm trying to like look for the good. And so specifically I'm wondering if Starling is like hanging out with Nick to divert attention away from Fitz that would be there if she was spending all that time with him.
No, I don't think so. I think she likes the attention that Nick gives, and she's probably got a nice warm bed with him too.
Hmm. True. Okay. Very
I
valid.
was
But
under the
also,
assumption that Starling is always out for herself.
but even okay, but in
I
this
agree.
chapter, fair. But I feel like she's also like genuinely like just like mm, I feel like she, even if it's for her own interest, she's genuinely in Fitz's camp slash thinks that she's friends with Fitz, especially with like the conversation they have at the end of this chapter about where her and Fitz like exchange pieces of their lives and like kind of trade that feeling of like both feeling trapped in like whatever quests they have to follow to see through to the other side of whatever life they might have.
Mhm.
I also thought it's interesting, like that Star, like how perceptive Starling is in the sense that I feel like she's the first person who isn't like very close to Fitz who kind of like identifies how like catalytic he is. She's like, yeah, you were present at this and this and this. You make shit happen. And I feel like most people other than like the fool who obviously has good reason to do that, and Shade who is like, Fitz, you're always doing too much. They don't identify that.
Yeah, I think she was the first person outside of them to notice that.
Oh yeah, also talking about Starling, she has a quote where she's like this is like the start of a longer rant, but she's like, a year, men, they go off to fight or to travel, and they expect their lives to be waiting for them when they get back. And like, I feel like this perfectly encapsulates how like Fitz is when he like goes off on like his 15-year like sabbatical into the cabin in the woods. Um, and I'm like, yes, there should be more consequences for just like fucking off into the forest for ages, but then yeah, the ending of Tawny Man doesn't really support that.
Yeah. Speaking of Starling, this is kind of this is near the end of the chapter where they're kind of bearing their like life to each other. But I'm sure that the only reason that Fitz is really telling Starling about Molly and Nettle is just because he's so excited and he's got literally no one else to tell because no one knows him as Fitz. And like he doesn't share, like, he's not gonna share his secrets with anybody else, and it's not like Nighteyes can really understand and, like, be that excited, but, like, he must be so excited and happy that, like, he's got a daughter and, like, he's got something to look forward to in a future, and, like, that's why he's sharing it, even though, like, it is the worst decision he could have made.
Yeah, I get it, but it's like so painful to read. It's like, shut up, Fitz, please stop.
Yeah. It also is kind of, I just thought about this. It's kind of cool that he tells like Starling and that she's a minstrel because we learned in like a couple chapter intros ago that they acted as like historians kind of, and they keep all of this information and all of this like the record keeping of people's lineage and stuff. So it's kind of cool and fitting that Fitz would tell a minstrel about his daughter.
I feel like deep down he must have wanted everybody to know. Because why would you ever tell a minstrel a secret? Like, that'd be like telling the town gossip.
Right.
I think that Fitz just doesn't register Starling as minstrel right now because he, like, I don't think he ever, like, truly comprehends the, like, power that she has as a minstrel until way too late. He's like, "You're just fucking following me around and I'm not doing shit. I guess you sing good, but, like, you're not gonna get a story out of me." And so whenever he's talking with Starling, he's just like, "Yeah, this is Starling, the person who has been following me, not
Yeah.
Starling the minstrel."
Starling the stalker, not Starling
Yeah,
the
exactly. Starling, the person, one of the only people who know my identity, so I guess I better keep her close.
Right. I don't know why he never thinks to kill her. Like, it
Honestly.
never once crosses his mind, right? Like, at least as far as we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
But,
That feels like
like,
super out of character.
yes, because, like, she blatantly knows that it's him, and she could easily, like, we see with Tassin how easily, like, his identity can be sold out to people. So, like, why wouldn't he at least consider killing her?
He doesn't even consider killing Tassin.
I know, what the fuck?
Using his touch.
I think it's because, like, his failed assassination on Regal really shook his confidence, so that's not something that he, like, thinks about unless it's like, a last resort, what he does with, like, Bolt and the rest of Regal's guards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also like he's never really. It's like what the fool says later on, where like he's never really like been suited for killing. Even like he really needs like a good reason to do it. Like he'll like if like with Verde and everything, he's like, "You represent the people who like hurt me and killed me." But when it's something softer, where it's like, sure, they sold out my identity, but like he deep down, I think he's like, I get it. Some you need to like I'm just a random person and they want to like and they're trying to get out of their life. And it's like
Yeah.
he gets it a little too much to be ruthlessly in his own corner. Which
He's
it should be
too,
that should be something he learned from Starling.
he's too empathetic. Like, he needs to not care so much about people and, like, put himself in people's shoes. Like, can you not? And just, can you kill to, like, save your own life, boy?
We're the
Come
worst influences.
on.
Like, stop
Yeah.
caring about other people, Fitz. Do more murder.
Yeah. It would save him so much pain. Like, if we just, like, could tell him who to kill and he would just do it. I'm just saying. I think it might help him a little bit.
I wonder, actually, just thinking about the time period that he's like reluctant to kill people. I wonder if like Nighteyes being away had something to do with it, and like Nighteyes being like the pragmatic hunter would be like, yeah, we need to do this to survive, and without that like whispering, he doesn't kind of go for it.
Well, I don't think Nighteyes, at least before he leaves, like, he doesn't like killing other people. He thinks that it's, like, wrong and kind of gross. Like, even with the forged ones, he didn't like it before, like, hunting them down. And then later on in this section, when Moon's Eye is being, like, burned to the ground, Nighteyes kills that old man to help Fitz. And that's when we kind of see, like, he's becoming a little bit more man, where he's like, it had to be done to kind of like help you. and some
Mhm.
of those things just need to happen, and it wasn't, like, his animal thinking of how he thought in, like, Royal Assassin.
Right. I think but even at the start of this book, we have, like, the framing of, like, okay, like, Night Eyes finally understands the motivation. Because I think the thing with the
Yeah,
assassinations and royal assassinations, like, this makes no fucking sense. Why are we doing this? This is, like, senseless. But then,
yeah.
like, as soon as he could, like, comprehend Fitz's, like, motivation for wanting to kill Regal, I think, like, that was, like, the first big shift there.
Well, I think as soon as Will attacks them again,
Mm.
that's what really shifted Night Eyes' thinking.
Mhm.
Speaking of Night Eyes, I love how he kind of just comes up and pretends to be a dog, and Kettle is like, "There's a wolf beside our cart." And Fitz like, "No, that's my dog, like, he's got a part wolf in him or whatever, but, like, it's my dog." And she's like, "So they herd sheep with wolves and buck these days." Like, I love that, and that she just, like, accepts it as this is what it is and, like, knows she sees right through Fitz's, like, pretense of he's a dog. I loved it.
Yeah, I wonder how much Kettle knows and like when she starts to figure things out if she doesn't know right away. But it's like who else would be just traveling around with a wolf? Like, mm, it has witted bastard energy.
I feel like it also becomes much more clear when he uses elf bark to, like, help his skill headache. I feel like that's kind of where it clicks in with her, at least more, if not, like, fully.
Right.
Fitz is like the least like he takes so little caution with hiding his identity. He's just like no one will guess it. And
Yeah.
I think Kettle probably also suspects when like she's like, "So what part of Buck are you from?" And he's like, "Buckkeep." And like I love how like most of the time he's like, "I'm a master of assassin, a paragon of deceit." And then Kettle asks him two questions and he's like, "Oh god."
Yes.
He's like sweating. He literally says that. Yeah, the badgering was making me sweat a little, and I'm like, Fitz, she asked you two questions.
And he, like, is sweating so obviously that she can see it too. Like, she knows.
Mhm.
He's really not doing his best.
Like, yeah, he gives away his like he basically gives himself away to Kettle. Meanwhile, Kettle is like essentially like hitting him over the head with a hammer of like the what she's going to do, and he's like, I don't get it. Like
Mhm.
Kettle like even the wording she uses is so similar to like the fool's speech from last time, but he's like, oh, never heard of that.
I love that she says, "It's probably a fool's errand I go on," and then starts talking about the white prophets. Like, that should have been obvious. Like, Fitz, come on, man.
Oh, and right after that she says, and yet what better use do I have for these years than to chase a chimera? And I was like, this is a stretch, but like the way the six duchies dragons are kind of described is kind of chimeric. The way that they're not just dragons, but they also have like antlers, or some of them have like other animalistic features. So it's like that could just be a random like metaphorical word choice, or it could be a little like wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
I like that Kettle calls him boy because no one really calls him that other than Shade these days. Um, but also like during his conversation with Kettle, there's a hashtag Nettle Watch where her like fingers are cold. And Fitz says, an old friend of mine said that sometimes the sting of nettles actually relieved his hands when they ache. And she's just like, you find me nettles growing under snow and I'll try them, boy. I was like, so many foreshadowy hints.
Yeah.
And like we were talking last time about how Kettle has like big lady time energy, and then her calling him boy, I think, is definitely like a big factor in that.
Yeah.
That might be why Fitz likes her so much or is so endeared by her.
For sure. It's got to be at least part of the reason is like she reminds him of Shade a little bit.
Maybe Kettle and Shade should have gotten together.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that like also like that just made me think about, because in the same chapter, Fitz is like he's talking about like at some point realizing that he truly like changed from a boy to a man, and he's like, I think I made a better boy than I do a man. And so it's a complete flip from the start of this book where he's like, stop treating me like a boy. I'm like I'm a real man now. And now he's like sort of like longing for like, actually maybe this being an adult shit ain't all it's cracked up to be.
Someone tried to tell him. Am I the only one that completely forgot that apparently, like, the goal of white prophets in the end, like, the long-term goal is to, like, put the world on a better path so that eventually, like, time just kind of stops?
I definitely forgot that.
Yeah, that was also one of my notes where I was like, do they talk about this whole end of time goal later? Like, I was
We'll
wondering
have
if
to
it's just
keep an
something I
eye on.
missed in like the last trilogy.
I feel like this is definitely something to, like, keep in the back of our minds because I don't feel like I remember it in the last trilogy, but I think that I was flying through it anyways, so I'm sure there is so much that I missed.
Hmm. But yeah,
But
I
I
totally just like
think
remembered like we're just putting the wheel of time on a better track, and like never remembered what that track was supposed to be leading to.
yeah. I feel like it's a really cool end goal though,
Right.
because it's like a different way of like thinking about it's like immortality almost or like paradise or something.
Hmm. Yeah, like I kind of didn't know how to feel about it, to be honest, because I was like, lots of the message of the series feels like learning how to live with the parts of your life you've already had, instead of like being able to like move freely through it.
Mhm.
Um, so I would like, and it might just be not really like the concept itself, but the way that Fitz decided to engage with it, where he's like, I would go back and solve all of my problems. Where that kind of like put me off a little bit. But yeah.
I feel like at that point, because we're so far away from that end goal of the white prophets, that when it does happen, I think that people will either live long, like thousands of years or whatever, and they'll kind of realize that life should just be lived like and accepted as it is instead of going back and trying to change things. And then maybe they'll try and like start time again to get the cycle going all over again because maybe they'll have like forgotten what suffering and all of that stuff means and then they have to learn it again and start the cycle over. And I completely lost where I was going with that. So yeah, that's the end.
Or an alternative thing is like just by putting the world on a better track again and again, we get to a point where humans are like genuinely selfless. So the thought isn't like, I'm going to go with the end of time, I'm going to go back and fix my personal life problems. It's like the moving through time will be sort of like for the benefit of all.
And I wonder if that's kind of how the Farseers started, like got their name and everything is time does stop and they do get to that point and what the fool said is right, how the future does come back and name the Farseers so that they can like really keep the world on its right path.
Yeah,
I
because
like that
it was
theory.
mentioned that it was like the future talking back.
And maybe it's one of those things where like it's a repeating thing where it like always has to happen. Like the name Farseer has to get passed back to the past from the future, or else that future will never be a thing. So it's kind of like chicken or the egg thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just had one last note for the chapter, which is when Fitz is talking about, or like defending his bond with Nighteyes to Starling, he's like, "It is one thing to be willing to die for another. It is another to sacrifice the living of one's life for another. That is what he gives me, the same sort of loyalty I give to my king." Which, like, on one hand, go off, Fitz. But on the other, I feel like this comparison should give him pause because of how much he himself suffered for giving up his life for his king.
Also, there's like the implication that Fitz is to Nighteyes what Verity is to Fitz, which is not correct.
Yeah. I think that Fitz is just trying to explain it in a way that Starling will understand. I don't think that's truly how it is, and Fitz knows that, but there's no way that he could explain the bond that he shares with Nighteyes in any way other than that will make her even understand some of it.
Mm-hmm.
My last note was also about Fitz's wit, but it was more just kind of a thought, like, I have always just kind of accepted Fitz's wit and been like, this is how it is. Like, of course, like, why would anybody think that it's wrong or scary or anything like that? And I was thinking a couple days ago, and I'm like, it must be terrifying for someone who's not witted to see this wolf come up and be so close to people, because like we are taught that like wild animals can sometimes be like erratic and they're wild. It's not like you can reason with them. So they probably don't know and don't understand that Nighteyes is this intelligent being. They just see him as this gigantic predator who can kill you very quickly and easily. And it must be really scary. And it kind of makes me a little bit more understanding of like the way Starling reacts the first time that she finds out, like the first time that she sees Nighteyes, and why she like keeps her distance from Fitz for a minute, because that must have been scary.
Yeah, I think I had that as a note in like a later chapter, but it was when there's like that boy in the jail that's obviously like super scared of Fitz and just like freaked out by him. And it's like, "Oh, you're like I can't think of a better word than racist for people that hate witted people, or like homophobic. I don't know. Whatever
Yeah.
the
Just
witted
bigoted,
version
yeah.
of that is. But like in reality, if you were a kid and you knew that someone could just like sick a wolf on you with their mind, it would be scary. Like if we weren't on Fitz's side or in Fitz's head and didn't understand him, he would be like an intimidating presence because he somehow gets out of every like trap that anyone ever has him in, and people are dying around him all the time. And you know he's got like a wolf somewhere lurking. Like,
Oh yeah, and he's escaped the chains of death itself, which you know.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, he's a scary guy. Like he would be a good bad guy.
Oh, for sure. Well, I don't know. He's not that good at being a bad guy, but
Yeah.
like if we
His
didn't
aura.
yeah, if
No,
we
but like
didn't know his
how
mind
how
like
how
him
much
so
Regal is
well,
able to
I
like
think he'd be a
turn the
bad guy.
people against him because like symbolically he's like he has like big Disney villain energy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But then you see like inside him and he's like Kronk. He's like not actually the villain.
Mm.
Uh,
Oh yeah, and like to go back to like it's hard to like understand Nighteyes as like an intelligent thing. Even like the fool who is like one of the most like empathetic characters in the series, like initially perceives like Nighteyes as like big slobber beast, and it's not until like the skill connection that he's like, wow, this noble hunter.
Mhm.
I think that's all I have for this chapter. Do y'all have
Yeah.
anything else?
No.
Okay. So we're moving on to chapter 17, River Crossing. Um, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The gang gets to a river, they try to cross it. Oops, betrayal. Turns out Nick had a deal with the Pharaoh guards and planned to hand Fitz over. And Fitz and the rest of the pilgrims and Starling end up getting captured. Yeah, I remember the first time I read this, my reaction was finally some action. We're doing something. Followed like 2 seconds later by Nighteyes, no! As he like jumps over to the side. I'm like, never mind. We can go back to peaceful traveling.
Yeah, I think I must have just gotten like really sucked into this chapter because I only had one note and I already said it in the last chapter section. But
I mean,
it's
it just
intense.
shit happens so quickly here. It's
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of my notes, I only have a handful of notes too, but they all really happen
At the end.
after the like actual river crossing, just because that is so intense and like you do kind of have to just be sucked in and live it. There's no way to like slow that down and analyze it.
yeah, and like half the time Fitz's mind is with Nighteyes like going down the river.
Yeah, and almost drowning.
Mhm. Once again,
I
the
remember
things this wolf does for Fitz.
the first time I read this, I remember just being like I didn't even care what was happening to Fitz because I was so worried about Nighteyes.
Yes. And I'm sure that I think that Fitz feels the same way.
Yeah, because he's just like kind of sitting there disassociating.
He's out of his body for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the wild thing is, like, what I just started thinking about is Nighteyes never tries to leave his body to go into Fitz. Like, obviously, Nighteyes isn't dying that badly. Like, he still has a lot of fight in him and everything like that. But, like, that was never even a thought that crossed his mind. But then, like, Fitz faces some hardship and, like, is on the brink of death again. And almost automatically kind of slips into, like, leaving his body. Do you
I
guys
think
think that it's just because he's done it before, so his body is like or his mind is like, "Oh, like, this is our escape, we're dying, there's no choice?" Or is it just because, like, Nighteyes doesn't ever want to be a man?
I think there's an appeal to being a wolf that Fitz has always been attracted to, and I don't think there's ever been an appeal for Nighteyes to be a person. But
Yeah.
also, Fitz's circumstances are almost always equal or worse than Nighteyes'. Like when the arrow thing happens and Fitz is like naturally kind of drifting into Nighteyes and Nighteyes like, no, don't. At that point, Nighteyes is like healthy and warm and like
Mhm.
doing his own thing. There's never an instance where
Fitz
Nighteyes is
even
like
better
on the
than
brink of
Nighteyes.
right. So like where would Nighteyes go? Like, oh, out
Yeah.
of my strong wolf body into like this shitty man.
Who's got, like, just a lump of flesh on his face, no real nose. The
Right.
only good thing about being a human is you can scratch all of the itchy places. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
Unless
get
it's in that
porcupine
one
quills
spot
out
on your
of
back.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's also like even for Fitz, it took like so much like cajoling and work from Nighteyes to get him out of his body in the first place. So I think it
Yeah.
is a little bit of column. I forget which one you mentioned first. Column A, column B. Yeah,
Mhm.
it, where it's like once that path has been forged, it's just sort of like easier road to take.
Yeah. I really like that they kind of have grown and Night Eyes has learned to realize that being one isn't that good. Like being two like consciousnesses in the same body isn't a good idea. And he's kind of like we see that he's grown and he's learning.
Yeah, there's so many like little examples of like Nighteyes' growth, like
Yeah.
throughout, like mentioning earlier, like how he was willing to kill that man to save Fitz. Just like I feel like just Nighteyes just feels more sure of himself and like feels like he's got like his values in check. He's just so much more mature than Fitz, and like I wish we kind of got a little bit of time to dwell on that, but we never really do because everything starts happening once Nighteyes returns.
I think also the reason that Nighteyes accepted Fitz into his body in the first place is just because Nighteyes was so lonely. And after he's experienced life as a like in a pack and like being family with these other wolves, he realizes that what him and Fitz had in the past definitely wasn't healthy sometimes, their attachment, and it's not pack. Like being in the same body doesn't make you closer or a pack or like better.
I forget there's like exact lines later, but yeah.
Hmm.
Let me see if I can. Uh,
My book is in my room, and I feel like if I get up, Frodo's gonna be like, "Are you taking me outside?" So I'm scared to move. So I'm not gonna get it.
yeah, I
I
have it.
For a
We could
walk, so
share,
I'm.
but we could not become one another, not without both of us losing. And yeah, it's
Yep.
like because they've grown so much as a result of each other, slash they've gotten so much perspective from each other that to try and force that into one body, they would naturally lose that.
yeah.
So I love how Frodo is just like here now for every episode. I love him.
He's
Constant.
he's like a Velcro dog. He's always even if you can't see him, he's always there.
That's so
Oh,
cute.
I've never heard the term Velcro dog. I'm going to use that all the time now.
I know, I love
Yeah,
that.
I think the first time I heard it was someone was describing the way like all pit bulls are Velcro dogs because they just stick to their owner, their person all the time. And I was like, I want a Velcro dog when I get my next dog. And I think I wished a little bit too hard into the universe because he's too much of a Velcro dog.
He's a glue dog, not a Velcro
He
dog.
is. Yeah. Yep.
One of my friends has a dog, but he really like imprinted on her mom, and her mom has to go off on like business trips all the time.
Oh.
So like he'll regularly just like get into like a depression and be like, "No, I don't want to go for a walk." And then like her mom will come back and he's just back to his normal self.
I hate when my mom comes and stays. Like she'll stay, she stayed after my surgery or like if she's gonna watch him or something, but if she's here, he doesn't give a shit about me and it makes me so jealous.
That's like Fitz and Nighteyes.
Yeah.
With
Yep.
Heart of the Pack.
Mhm.
Yep.
Uh, I think like the other big thing that happens in this chapter is just we get to see Burl, another one of the coterie.
Who's
Um,
fat.
they really were just like a little fat phobia as a trait. When you become evil, you become fat.
Yeah.
hmm Um, and then he ends up breaking Starling's fingers, which is kind of like the big "we mean business" part of this
And
chapter.
the worst thing you could ever do to a minstrel.
hmm
Ever.
hmm
The angles thing was gross.
Yeah, that reading it made me so uncomfortable because it's very like even though it's not like long and drawn out, it is kind of graphic and it did make me a wee bit queasy. Like that was so gross. And
Yeah.
I can just like it was so detailed and you can like hear it in your mind like, "Oh no." And I could like feel it in my body. I was like, "Please no, I don't want to read this anymore."
It was almost as bad as the forged one biting a chunk of
Yes.
neck.
Yes,
Yeah, I
definitely.
feel like the force one biting is like that one, like, I feel like there's a little bit of like abstraction in the sense of like it's just not like a thing you like can like visualize or think about. At least not for me, maybe. But like,
It's not
because like I
something
feel
that
like that's just so
you would
out of.
expect to happen. It's not something you can really see happen in real life.
Mhm.
But the finger
Meanwhile,
break,
like I feel like everyone knows at least someone who's had a broken limb or bone or at some point.
yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah. I like can't watch zombie movies because I hate seeing them bite. So the forged one neck thing is like there's like nothing grosser to me than that, but you can like viscerally picture Starling's fingers based on the description and it's ick.
So yucky. And fingers are so delicate in general. Like, oh my God, I can't. I don't even want to imagine that happening to mine. And the fact that
mhm.
a human like did that to them and like inflicted that onto Starling, like, it's just the worst.
Just
Mhm.
don't piss off a skill wizard and then you'll be fine, Alex. No one will break your fingers.
Yeah,
Wait,
I think I
wait,
don't have to
speaking of
worry
like
about
this,
that.
speaking of like the skill part of it, I'm like confused as to like, because like Burl mentions like, yeah, you lied to Will, he interrogated you, and I'm like, they're skilled. How can you like lie to a skilled person if you're not if you don't have skill walls of your own? Are they just like not using their skill for interrogation? And if so, like why not?
Well, I
That might be
kind of
scary.
made the assumption that lied and he knew that she was lying and was like, oh, we'll just get her later.
Oh,
Or
okay, that
maybe
could be it.
Starling doesn't have any skill.
But you can
Mm,
still dip into like skilled skill users can still dip into like people's minds even though they don't have any like skill
Yeah.
themselves
unless they're like skill blasted, like
or
Burridge or
blocked like Burrich. But I
Mhm.
don't think anybody would do that for Starling. Like nobody in the skill really
Right.
knew her
Go in and block
beforehand.
her.
The one thing I could think of is that like maybe it was exhausted by Regal like overusing Will's skill, and so like didn't really have it available.
Well, I think also at the time she probably didn't know where Fitz was. And it
Mm,
wasn't a
this
lie,
was
and then
like
she found
before.
out
Okay.
after she had been interrogated. She went and, like, in search of Fitz.
Okay, yeah, that's really fair.
Because, I mean, yes, it is lying in hindsight, but at the time, she would have believed that wholeheartedly, just the same
I
as,
think
like,
that
Fitz believed he was dying with the poisoned, knife. Even though that's technically a lie, he believed it completely, and it's kind of the same thing, I think, with Starling, too.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Also, did they know at that point that Fitz and Starling were like friends or traveling together? Because um she's just some like rando in the party that was a large party that they caught Fitz in. So how would they know to like specifically skill interrogate her? Maybe they saved that for like strong leads.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, I was just like I just assumed that like they would skill interrogate everyone who'd come
Right.
to Blue Lake, but also like it makes sense that like it might just be like Will was using like sometimes like the skill users have like they can like sense surface intentions, and like Will
Mhm.
was just like using that and not going deep in.
Right.
Do you all think that everybody gets skill headaches like Fitz, or is that just a, like, byproduct of, what Galen did to him?
I think it's from what Galen did to him because he didn't get headaches before, or not what Galen did to him, what Regal did to him at the end of Assassin's Apprentice. Because he didn't get headaches after his like
Oh,
practices.
yeah. You're
Didn't
right, you're
start getting headaches until the beginning of Royal Assassin after he got poisoned and like beat up and thrown into that pool and almost drowned.
Hmm.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
like I
makes
think other people get like skill exhausted, but they don't have like
Mhm.
pain in the same way that Fitz
He gets
does.
like a migraine.
So Verity just used elf bark for, like, its energizing purposes, like caffeine almost?
Pretty
Shade
much.
like thought that it was a revitalizing thing and didn't know that it had like skill deadening stuff, I think. So he was just like, "Oh, you're tired. Take elk bark."
Shade. I mean, that's basically Shade's MO. Like, if he can
Drugs.
have a drug for it, like he will do it.
Right.
It's like, I know carrot seeds are bad, but I feel like this one's good because there's not that much research on it, so it's got to be fine, right?
Right.
Which is really funny considering how like Shade is like Mr. Information Man with like 20 journals at the start of like Tawny Man, but like he's like, fuck it. Like, I mean, just take like half a cup of this and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's so funny reading these after reading the other ones because this feels so, I know I've said it before, but it feels like so much the Dark Ages. Like there's so much that they don't know and they're just running around blind guessing and doing wrong shit all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at the time you're just like, this is just how the world is, and then you
Right.
like get further and it's like, no, not
It is
really.
not how the world is.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think I had
that's all
anything
I
special.
had.
Yeah, this was a weirdly short chapter, which you would expect that like we would have more to talk about in the actiony chapters rather than the slower chapters, but it's just like more conversations happen in the slower chapters, and that has more like interesting tidbits to pull on.
Yeah.
Right.
And the fast-paced, action-packed ones were just so like sucked into it that
Hmm.
it's hard to like pull yourself out to make a note of something or like even notice stuff. Like I always find myself reading faster when there's action because I'm like, I need to know what's going on instead of reading like critically.
Hmm. Yeah, if you just asked me like, so what were your notes about that? I was like, it was cool, it was fun,
Yeah.
which doesn't bode well for like the next two chapters of high adrenaline action, but let's see. So, next chapter is Moon's Eye, and this is where Fitz is eventually taken, um, like and like held by Burl while like I don't ever know what they're waiting for. Are they waiting for like to like transfer? They're probably waiting to transfer him down to Pharaoh essentially. But this is also coincidentally where Chivalry was originally stationed when he came to do his treating with Jampe. Um,
And is that also where Fitz was dropped off, or is that where Fitz was taken after he was dropped off at like a different little camp?
I have a note about this. This is where Fitz was dropped off.
That's
And like there's a part where he's kind of reminiscing as they're being brought in where he's like, I found myself being interested and wondering if like I had traveled a long way with my grandfather to get to here or if we were from around here and he just brought me into town. And he was like looking for anything familiar, but nothing really seemed familiar. But my note was just that it kind of felt out of character for him to be wondering that much, because usually he like just shuts off anything that he doesn't want to think about, or like he doesn't really care about anything from the past, or from his childhood. So it kind of stuck out to me because I was like, this is weird of him to be ruminating like this, and I'm surprised that he's interested or cares in Moon's Eye or like where he came from.
I think it makes more sense if you think about it as like Tawny Man Fitz reliving this. And maybe that's why he's starting to like wonder so much and think about it, is because he's kind of sitting here like reliving it in his cabin where he's safe. So he's got time to think and
Yeah.
like wonder about his history because he's not doing anything else. And I mean, at that time he is raising Hap. So I feel like when you do have a kid and you're like raising them, it does bring back memories and things from your childhood that you may have forgotten until they had gotten to like that age.
Right.
Especially since Hap, like, just like Fitz, doesn't have like a clear knowledge of his past slash childhood.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. But yeah, in this very section, there's like Fitz shying away from like his childhood, where like the Kettle is like, your mom must have taught you well, Fitz. And then Fitz is like, I know she meant well, but I took psychic damage when she said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Fitz.
Mm-hmm.
My only other note is just that, like, Regal's the worst, and all his soldiers are the worst. But, like, it's kind of striking that these are Six Duchy soldiers. They're the same people or group of people that would have been soldiers under Verity or under Shrewd or whatever, but then they're, like, just brutalizing citizens, like, and thinking that it's fine. It's like, how come when Regal's the ruler, everybody is terrible?
I feel like he probably did some cleaning up of the Buckkeep or like the whole like Six Duchies like guards and everything, and put in the people that he liked and that were most loyal to him, and just kicked out the people that he knew were most loyal to everyone else. Like he definitely dismissed all of like Verity's guards and like the people who were
Yeah, he
loyal
left
to
behind the
like
Queen's Guard and
true.
Bugkeep.
Yeah. And
I
he
also feel
probably
like he would also
took a
have like at the
couple
lower
more
level
people.
like lower standards for people. He's like, just
Yeah.
like no more background checks. Do you have
Yeah.
muscles? Can you use a sword? Okay, you're in.
Yeah, and I guess there's not the threat of, like, repercussions, so they feel like they can get away with whatever they want. Like, who's gonna care if I, like, R-word all these pilgrims? No one cares. So I can do it.
Well, and it also seems like Moon's Eye wasn't the most like clean, nice place to be anyways, even before like Regal took over, because I think that there was a note about how like all the people who had done bad and the Six Duchies just kind of wanted to get rid of were placed in like
Yeah,
Moon's
it was
Eye.
basically like the Australia of the Six
Yeah.
Duchies.
Australia of the Six
It's the
Duchies.
dumping ground.
It also sounded like a little bit like they talk about like Captain Mark, the person that like Nighteyes yoinked overboard, and it sounded like he
Yoinked.
sort of he sort of like kept them in check a little bit. Like he's the one who had to deal with the smugglers and all of that, but they're like, now that he's not here, we can do whatever the fuck we want.
Yeah.
Um, Fortunately, though, in the middle of the section, the pilgrims do manage to escape because uh, part of the Holdfast family, Nick's family, come back to rescue the smugglers and the pilgrims. Which means basically everyone other than Fitz manages to get out because they're like, ah, fuck that guy. Which, like, I find myself agreeing with what Fitz says here, where it's like, I mean, I can't really like the guy because he turned in Fitz, but I have begrudging respect for the fact that he came back for the pilgrims as well, and not just the smugglers.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I only have 3 notes for this, and they're 3 different quotes. And one of them, I just kind of had to laugh a little bit at. Fitz is like, "I was very tired of being hit, but it seemed the one thing I did well lately." And I was like, "Oh, dang."
Mhm.
Don't say that, Fitz. That's upsetting.
Career
Yes.
change from assassin to punching bag.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Mhm. Yeah, this weirdly enough, this chapter has like the tone flips really like it's like really serious when they're traveling and when the pilgrims escape. And like Fitz gets to his cell and it's sort of like more jovial, where like Nighteyes is like, oh yeah, will you escape soon? Like just so casual about it.
And he's like under the jail cell and everything. He's like, "I'm here right now." He's like knocking on it, like, "Hello, don't you see me? I'm right here." We're basically cellmates. We're buddies.
Don't worry, a bunch of other dogs have like climbed under here. And isn't that what you called me? A dog? I will
Right.
fit right in.
One thing from Nighteyes that like ties into what we were talking about before was showing how much he's grown and everything. He says, when we were apart, I came to know I had a life of my own. I found a place of my own in my mind. And I was like, that's kind of exactly what Fitz wanted for himself in Royal Assassin. And it seems like with Nighteyes growing up and finding that, he'll be more willing to like give that to Fitz as well. And they can have like a place in their mind where they share together, and then they can also have their own privacy away from each other.
And it's so like cute because like Nighteyes is like like the exact quote is like, I sensed a hesitancy to his thought, as if he expected me to rebuke him for it. Instead, I embraced him, wrapping him in the warmth I felt for him. And just like,
I loved that. He was like nervous to tell Fitz, and it's so cute.
he's like, I need my space sometimes, and Fitz is like, no, I get that, I get that. I've been doing that exact thing.
Yeah.
And like another thing for like Nighteyes growth TM is Nighteyes like getting that tunnel underneath the city wall, and like Fitz is like, that's wise planning. And like, you know, like old Nighteyes would not have been able to think past like, we have to get you out of your cell, and then we'll think about what comes next.
Yeah. Nighteyes is forming an escape plan before Fitz has even thought about it or like even asked him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think my last note was a quote from Starling, and I actually loved it. She says, I learned long ago not to blame myself for evil done to me. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't even your fault. You were just the catalyst that started the chain of events. And hashtag catalyst watch, but also like go Starling, standing against victim blaming. Very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if Starling isn't like such a massive narc, I would like her.
Yeah.
It's like her being a narc and her being mean to Hap in Tawny Man. Those are the two things that make me hold a grudge against her.
Yeah, we can't stand for that. But we can stand that she stands for no victim blaming.
No victim blaming. Yep.
And the fact that she even like said it about herself too. That she's like, it's not my fault that this evil happened to me. She realized. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it's so interesting because like, there's so many parts of Starling where it's like very compelling, and then others which is just like, oh, I don't want to know you.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you're mean to children? Okay. Never mind.
Yeah.
Not just me, like she's like vicious to have.
I know. She's like a total bitch. I don't like to use that word about women, but
Mm-hmm.
If the
in
shoe fits.
a not positive way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. I'll call someone a bad bitch all day if they are one, but
right.
like,
But Starling's a mean bitch.
Starling's the bad kind of bitch.
Mm-hmm.
She's not a bad bitch. She's a bad bitch.
Exactly.
Okay, but like at least at
stuff.
this point, I appreciate that like she came back for Fitz in like it, which like I feel like
he would have died if it wasn't for Starling in this moment. This is like the one time someone other than Nighteyes is saving his life.
Mm-hmm.
Just because Nighteyes doesn't have hands to like open the cage.
That would have been the fucking dumbest way to die.
Actually, Nighteyes would have just brought the keys to Fitz, and Fitz would have unlocked. So he didn't really need Starling.
But I don't think that Fitz could fully reach the lock. I think he like had it so he could touch the top of it and like brush against it, but I don't think that he could have gotten the key into the actual lock and like turned it to open it himself.
Okay, I'll give
Like, I think it would have been
Starling this one.
She sucks, but she doesn't suck that bad that she's gonna let our boy die.
Right.
Yeah. And like from her perspective, she's gotten 2 fingers broken and she knows that like it's that or worse if she gets caught. And
Yeah.
so she's like in this moment I really appreciate her bravery and like especially the bravado to come in and be like, hello, it is me, Pharaoh Guard. I've come to initiate the transfer."
Yeah.
Always a performer.
And she's brave too for not like running away when Nighteyes comes in the door with like a bloody muzzle and a little bloody sack too. Like
Mhm.
I would have been scared.
Yeah, me too.
Then they burn down Moon's Eye, and that's where the chapter ends.
Yes.
So chapter 19, Pursuit. Um, in order to protect Kettle and Starling from Regal's wrath, uh, Fitz splits off from them and makes his own way towards Jampe through the woods. Um, and also decides to further emphasize "Here, come get me" by skilling into Regal and his coterie. Um, and yeah, they make it out, but not before a band of witted dogs chase him, and Fitz gets shot in the back with an arrow, which really caps off a series of increasingly bad days.
It's pretty badass of him to just like openly skill the whole coterie. Like that's
Badass
very
and also
scary.
extremely stupid.
Yeah.
And
He does
dangerous.
it to like protect Starling and Kettle. It's amazing like what he'll do at risk to himself to protect somebody else, because he would never do something like that if it wasn't like
At
someone
the
else.
benefit of someone else besides himself.
Right.
For if it's
Right.
himself, he's just like, I'll just die. No biggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like that's like the coolest thing that Fitz has ever done. And I completely forgot that he does this.
I
That he just
forgot.
like yeah. And like the way they describe it is like you have to like leave yourself open. But then it's just like the absolute bravado to just be like, no, my skill is stronger. I'm just gonna bonk all of you. And that was like 4 people, right? He basically just like sent 4 people reeling.
Yeah.
And this is coming from the person who I think like what just a few chapters ago was lamenting, oh, I can't get into the skill current.
And now he's over here like, I am so fucking strong. Let me just blast all these guys. And he said that he thought if it was just one man alone, he could have blasted the skill right out of them. Like, dang, Fitz. Okay.
And this is when he's like weak and like just escaped from a cell after like hard travel. Just
Yeah.
I think it's because he didn't think about it too much. Like when he sits down and thinks really hard and is like, skill, it doesn't work. But when he's just like, I need to do this, I'm doing it, then he's able to tap into it.
sure.
It's one of those things that he does better on instinct rather than on like his training and really thinking about it.
I love the skill. Because that's totally what it is. He'll just like sit down and be like, I'm thinking of the river. I'm thinking of the river. I'm so totally going in the river.
Yeah.
Exactly. When all the like hounds come after him, it made me really sad because the way that Hobb describes them is like I'm sure they're basset hounds. They're like short-legged and floppy ears, and I remember like I used to have Frodo's a mix, but he's mostly basset, and I used to have a purebred basset when I was growing up when I first read this. And every time I read it, when it describes Nighteyes like tearing off one of their floppy ears, I'm like, no! I feel so bad for those dogs. Like, they're on the bad guy's side, but they're just doing their job.
Yeah,
And they
it's
don't,
not
they
even
don't,
their
I don't
fault.
remember them seeming like actively malicious. They're just sort of like, we're here.
They're just following the trail.
Hmm.
And the witted one who's with them is telling them what to do. So they're
Right.
listening to someone who they're listening to their heart of the pack.
And Nighteyes is just like causing chaos, but like a bunch of them die, and then like
I
the
think all but two of them die.
doesn't he like stand at the top and kill all the dogs that are coming up at the hill?
Yeah.
Yeah, but then the rest of
Including
them.
the wit bonded one.
Mhm.
Hobb
Yeah,
was really like, okay, we have to get up our dog death counter. I really
Yeah.
slacked on it last book.
Right.
the like description of him tearing off one of the ears, like just is so cringe.
Oh yeah.
I always imagined them as like, have you guys ever watched that animated movie, The Fox and the Hound?
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, yeah. The okay, I feel uh, like most people I know have not watched it, so I'm super glad. But I always imagine like the dogs as like the dog from that, and like that just
What's
makes it
his
so much
name?
worse because I'm like
Todd.
they're so cute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like hounds are my dogs. Like I love hounds so much. So that part always makes my heart hurt because I'm like, oh, they're just doing their jobs.
I'm sure she didn't like writing it either because she's got so many animals. But it's just one of those things that needed to happen because like
It's
they're
really
not gonna go out and track the bastard and not have
right.
animals with
Not
them.
have dogs.
Right.
Speaking of her dogs, I think it's interesting that she has a dog named Molly.
She
Yes.
does?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she does.
Oh.
I can't imagine naming a dog after one of my characters. And like maybe she didn't name her after Molly, but she obviously knows that she has a character named Molly.
Yeah.
She named her dog that.
Either the dog was named Molly when she got her, or the dog's temperament is so much like Molly's that she couldn't help but name it Molly.
Had to. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, but yeah, I didn't really have many other notes for this chapter. It was just like, oh man, Fitz gets shot.
Yeah.
This one was another one of those very fast-paced, stress-inducing ones that are hard to slow down and really analyze.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's just like Fitz does a skill. He's kind of tired. Now there's dogs. Now there's an arrow in his back. Oh god.
And he still has to run away.
Hmm.
Here, I found a picture of Molly on her Instagram. It's hard to like see. There.
I love the little like
Cross-legged.
yeah.
And it says from a stinky, skinny, spooky rescue dog to a snarky, confident couch lounger. So she's a rescue, so maybe her name was Molly as when she got it.
That's also completely Molly like Nosebleed because
That's true. Yeah.
she starts off as this scrawny little like semi-orphaned girl who's kind of just running the streets like dirty and doing her own thing to this very fancy lady who like is strong and independent.
Oh, there's a comment that says you called her Molly with a heart, and Robin Hobb replied, she came with that name and we didn't want to confuse her by changing it.
It's so
It's
fitting
just
for her.
serendipity.
It was destiny.
Yep.
I'm sure like Hobbs saw traits of Molly in it, and so she's like, I don't want to confuse her. Let's just keep her name the way it is, and like liked it.
I think my last note for this chapter is I thought it was weird, but it was also like strangely cute how Nighteyes is like offering to chew up the rabbit for Fitz. And I also love how like that's what snaps Fitz out of it. Like Fitz is like, I'm so tired, I'm gonna die. And Nighteyes is like, you want me to choose your food for you? And like and Fitz is like, fuck, that sounds disgusting. Never mind. I guess I'll just eat it normally.
Yeah. No mama birding for me, please.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how mom dogs feed their puppies when they like get too old, like when they're
When they're
kind of
weaned
weaning off of nursing before they can like fully chew stuff.
Yeah.
They'll like chew little bits up and then like hold it in their mouth and put it on the ground for the puppy.
That makes sense.
It's really gross, but if it works, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah. Couldn't be me. There's no way I would do that.
Can you imagine if people did that? Oh my god, disgusting.
No,
Like, I wonder. Yeah, it's like I think it's really funny, like how there's lots of stuff that is like taken for granted by other species that we're just like, fucking what? Excuse me?
yeah.
I did that in an SNL skit once. There was like a bird SNL skit, and someone like chewed up food and then spit it into another cast member's mouth. And I remember like dying laughing, but also like wanting to throw up because I was like,
I would have died
they're-
inside.
they're actually doing this on TV. Like,
No.
Can you imagine? I'm pretty sure they don't do multiple takes for those. Can you imagine if it was one of the skits where you had to do multiple takes?
Oh my god, I would throw up.
I would
I would have to like I would fight tooth and nail to be the one who is the mama bird, not the baby bird. Like
Yes.
I would fight for
Yes.
that.
Oh god. Can you imagine that was the height of your celebrity? You're like you become famous and they're like, "Come on SNL." Oh, cool. Yeah, I know I've always loved the show. What am I doing today? Oh, you're getting food spit in your mouth. And it's like fucking no.
Pretend to be a baby bird.
Mm.
Horrible.
You know what isn't horrible? The last chapter of this section, baby. It's Jambe. We finally got here, and we finally get back to my favorite character. So, this chapter is just a treat because we get to see the main character once again. It's the Fool. They're back. Um, it's mostly Fitz getting caught up to speed on what happened with the Fool and Ketrican after he left, and then just some cute little bonding moments between the Fool and him. But yeah, I cannot believe we went a whole full half of the book without the Fool, especially given like how crazy important he becomes next trilogy.
I feel
Like
and it's
from
kind
now on, they are literally attached at the hip. And
yeah.
the Fool's in like every scene almost.
Yeah.
So that's what like sticks in your memory more.
Than the time about it, especially because Fitz is in a very dark spot for like 90% of the time when he's like on his own. He either doesn't have Nighteyes or he is a wolf. And now he's like back to being a fully civilized person, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think when the Fool finds Fitz and picks him up and takes him back to their house, there's a part where someone asks them like, "Who is that?" And the Fool says, "As to who he is, I have no idea." And I just think it's such a testament to how different Fitz looks that the Fool, who was his best friend, doesn't recognize him in like super close proximity.
Mm-hmm. Which also, to be fair, the Fool thinks he's dead. So like,
yeah, he's not looking for him, or they're not looking for him.
Also, it mirrors the kind of reunion scene that we get in the last trilogy with them also, but it's opposite. In this one, the Fool doesn't recognize Fitz at all because he's changed so drastically from the last time. And in the last trilogy, Fitz doesn't recognize the Fool at all either because they've changed. And they both Fitz and the Fool, for their transformation, have gone through so much like pain and torture and have had this like long road to get back to each other. And both were on like death's door by the time they were reunited with the other person.
Except the Fool in the last trilogy didn't really like have like a like a crazy large wound. So Fitz had to give one to the fool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not bad enough that the fool was blind and crippled and like starving and freezing to death. They needed a nice wound on the outside.
Yeah, I remember reading that for the first time and being like, I endured the first however much of this book where like shit isn't happening, and then we finally get back the fool and you stab him like that.
Yeah.
We stabbed
I
him.
was fully convinced the fool was about to like just die right then and there, and I was
Yeah,
like,
for sure. I mean, you can't call the trilogy like Fitz and the Fool trilogy without having the so, but yes.
but like it just
Very-
I was just very in the moment.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. I guess also speaking of the fool like not recognizing Fitz, he's like, "Oh, I can't believe what they did to you when I remember how beautiful you were." And I'm like, "Don't worry, dog. Like a while from now, you'll be like, nothing can ruin his face for me. He's
Yeah.
still,
His broken nose belongs like that.
yeah."
Mhm. I had to laugh though when someone is like, I must leave him in your hands, and the fool's like, and in my bed. Ivory Hand said dolefully. Like, if the fool had known it was Fitz, they would have been so grateful and so eager to give up their bed for him. And the fact that they have no clue and they're like, oh, this dirty stranger's like in my bed. Like, be grateful. This hot stranger is in your bed.
Mhm.
Hot, dirty stranger.
Right. And not just from the fever that he's got, from his
Mhm.
infection.
Mhm.
It like gives me anxiety reading about how many people are like going to see a white prophet and know that there's a white prophet in the mountains when I know that Clarice is like actively looking for the fool and trying to kill them.
Yeah.
Like obviously I know how it turns out and I know that no one from Clarice finds him at this moment, but the fact that it's like basically common knowledge is like anxiety inducing.
Yeah, it is
I
really
find
scary.
it's really funny how like the thing that torts like Clarice or like just they're like we have control of time and we know everything, and it's just like unfortunately it's they're halfway across the world. It's just like they're
Mhm.
torted by just space.
Distance.
Hmm.
Well, and I bet that the fool knows they're still being like hunted down and everything and just doesn't care at this point because they think that their whole life's purpose is ended because they still think that Fitz is dead. So they're like, they might as well come and get me because there's nothing else for me to live for. Like, I can't do any good in the world anymore. I just kind of have to hope that the next iteration of like white prophets can help.
And
Right.
like it must feel so horrible because they were like, oh shit, Clarice was right. Like
Yeah.
I actually did like fail. I
And
can't
the
even
fact
imagine what the
that he
fool was
has,
going
like,
through.
imposter syndrome for a hot minute, and then we find like, later on, I feel like in this book and, like, especially in the next trilogy, the Fool, I feel, is so, like, cocky and stuff,
Hmm.
and right now, they're, like, having this imposter like, "Am I even a white prophet?" And then later on, they're like, "Of course I'm a white prophet, and you're my catalyst. Do my bidding, boy." Like
He even
like
calls him boy at the end of this chapter.
yeah.
And yeah, I love like the whole like ending monologue where it's like tomorrow we shall be ourselves again, the fool and the bastard, or the white prophet and the catalyst. We will have to take up those lives as little as we care for them and fulfill all fate has decreed for us. But for here for now, just between us two, and no other reason save I am me and you are you, I tell you this, I am glad that you are alive. If there must be another my fate is twined around, I am glad it is you. And I'm like, oh, damn.
I know, my freaking heart. And I definitely was expecting the Fool to kiss Fitz when they leaned in and, like, put their forehead on Fitz's. I was like, "Are we gonna get a little kiss?" Even though I knew it wasn't
As a
gonna happen.
as a treat. The
Yeah.
I remember just being so confused when I first read this chapter, and then now reading back, I'm like, "Oh my god."
Yeah.
Mm. Um, Another quote that stood out to me is, uh, when the fool is, like, looking Fitz over, and he's like, "The fool's quick glance at my scarred face and the casting aside of his eyes told me he understood. he too had known Regal well. And like I was thinking it could also be even before that, the torture at the hands of the people of Claris when he was getting tattooed by the Pale Woman.
That's what I
Or-
was thinking of too.
Oh yeah, and there's also the thing I was referencing earlier where like the fool is like you're kind of shit at being an assassin. You were never really good at it, you know. There's a naivete to you that that the ugliness could never stain, as if you never truly believed in evil. It was what I liked best about you. It was what I missed most when you were dead. And it's like, yeah, like he's just at the heart of it. Fitz is just like a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I also love like right after that, Fitz is like, really, a while back I thought it was my great beauty. I'm like, oh my god. The the and
Dang.
like
And the
he's just
fool's like, well, you and Regal are both hot, but you're better because you don't know you're hot.
Mm-hmm.
and like Fitz is like, ah ha ha, wait, say that again? Like he still doesn't get it. He doesn't even get that he's flirting with the fool, even though he's like, I'm so hot, right? You just
Yeah.
said that. He's just like drunk for the first time in a while and he just doesn't, and also like delirious from injury, but also
Mhm.
come on, Fitz.
And I'm sure also so happy to be reunited with his friend too. And
Mhm,
Yes.
finally get someone who knew him in the past know him for all of him right now.
mhm,
It's the first like true friendly and familiar face since Birch.
mhm.
Yeah.
And Birch isn't always friendly.
No.
It even though like they come to regard their relationship as like friendly, just like the age difference just makes it like different. The
But yeah,
fool's
he's
like,
like
A different like power dynamic, I feel.
mhm,
right. He's more like a parent, whereas the fool is like a true friend.
Because I think they're of the same age, or at least Fitz always assumed that they were around the same age.
And this is the first friend that he's come across that knew who he was, that didn't like freak out or betray him or
Yeah.
get scared or have a weird reaction about like his wit.
His wit. Yeah.
Hmm. And he's not even scared that that's going to happen. He trusts the fool, like he's just relieved. He's not like, "Oh, you know who I am, you know, are you going to turn me in? Are you going to be afraid of me because I'm witted?" Like he's just like, "Oh, I'm safe."
he's worried
Yeah.
about
I love
Petrican or
that.
Shade finding out, but he's like, yeah, you know, I'm cool with you knowing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
I think it's also just like he is so happy that like the fool is so happy that Fitz is alive, and he's like, damn, I can't rely that everyone else will be this happy, but at least you are, I guess.
Hmm.
And they kind of like drop it, like it kind of like comes up, and then they don't like dwell on it too long. But then I think this is the first time we find out that Ketrican's child was like stillborn, essentially.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
Poor Ketrican. She like thinks her husband is dead, and all she has left of him is this baby that she's like clinging on to like by a thread, and then she doesn't have the baby anymore either. Like unless only like a year has passed and she's lost everything.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's like it really like contextualizes like lots of what she does. What like I think you can read lots of what she does to Fitz later as sort of like cruel, but it's like no, you still have things to lose, and like we have to like I'm and like I have to think about more than you or me. I have to think about the kingdom.
Hmm.
And Fitz is like, I've already given so much to the kingdom. Can you not just leave me be? And it's like, no, you haven't actually given that much, even though it
Yeah.
feels like a lot.
I feel like also after this, like patience could really have helped Ketrican. Like, if they could actually talk and, like, send letters back and forth, they would have been able to, I think, help heal each other a little bit just by kind of going, like, sharing the feelings that they both had dealing with their, like, miscarriages and everything.
I
Again,
agree.
another thing that Tawny Man robbed from us because we don't get patience on screen until the last book.
Yeah.
Because I totally feel like they would have, right? Because there's no way that, like, after Ketrican goes back, her and Patience don't, like, rekindle their friendship.
Yeah. Especially because you know Ketrican is gonna be so grateful for all of the things that Patience has done while she was away, and, like, the way that she took care of all of the people and really became the sacrifice for the 6 duchies.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I had anything else for this chapter.
No, me neither.
Me 3.
Where? Yeah. Oh, actually, I did have one last thing, which is the ending quote, which is, "We've the world to save, you and I," says the fool. And I feel like that's when, for me, it feels like the book really starts. Like, stuff happens before this, but then, like, okay, we have purpose, we have a quest. We're gonna go save the world. The fool is back. Well, fucking Fitz on his own, doing his own shit, whatever. But we got the gang back together.
Yeah.
This book almost feels like 2 books in one. Like 2 parts. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if it was meant to be like segmented, because that line would be a great ending
And
of a book.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, can you imagine if you were reading this as they came out and that line was the end? You'd be like, oh my god! I need
Yeah.
more!
And then you had to wait a whole year for the next one.
Yep. I would die.
Me too.
Having to have 3 books of this series for that ending is enough. I think if there were like 4 books for the ending we get for this series, I would simply evaporate. But
Oh my god.
I would be like, they did what to Fitz? I thought we are gonna save the world. I guess the world is saved, but save my boy.
Yeah.
The-
I think that would also feel really weird because I feel like Hobb naturally writes in trilogies, and it would just feel like wrong to have more than 3 books in each like trilogy.
Reading
Obviously, it
more of
wouldn't be a
City of
trilogy.
Dragons, I'm wondering more about how that's gonna pan out. Yeah.
Yeah, Rainwild sticks out like a sore thumb because it's 4 books instead of 3, like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I feel like it kind of makes sense a little bit because that's a little tiny bit of a deviation from like Fitz and everything because we really don't see like Fitz and the Fool aren't in that like at all. So it is weird in that sense, but then it kind of makes sense that it's like not a trilogy because they're not in it. And I feel like every trilogy has to have one of them in it. Cuz like even the Fool is in live ships with as Amber. So like every trilogy has at least one of our boys in it.
I
But
wonder what a trilogy with just Fitz as like a side character would look like. I wonder, like, in the Amber role.
yeah, I don't think Fitz would be able to do that just because he is so like so much the catalyst. Even if he tries to be a side character, he can't.
Yeah, literally, Fitz is not even there, and he makes an impact in live ships by saving Amber.
Hmm.
I just find I like we'll obviously talk more about this when we get to that, but I just find it hilarious how like Fitz is like, yeah, I just had a dream one day and I just force pushed and I saved your life. Like,
Yeah,
I'm just so impatient. I'm like, because I definitely I'm just like, ugh, there's so much in live ships. There's so much in Tawny Man. All we have to do is get through this book. But then each time I read more of this book, I'm like, okay, fine, I appreciate it. There's stuff here.
I think that this book is becoming my favorite on this read. Like, I think that I really am appreciating it. I think the most out of all of the 3 that we've read so far.
Interesting.
I still like Royal Assassin the most, but I think I had like a lot lower opinion of this book when I first read it, and I think rereading it, I see like so much more of like how the pacing is structured, like little things that like build up to the plot points and or like character development moments we know. And so I'm like, okay, there's purpose to how this is paced and like how it ended and all of that. So I'm appreciating it more.
I am very, very excited for live ships just because we're gonna be going into, like, spring and summer while we're reading it, and I always associate that trilogy with, like, spring and summer just because 'cause I'm like, Bingtown's gotta be, like, the southern part of America where it's, like, tropical and really, like, nice weather all the time. That's just what I associate, like, water and pirates and stuff with summer.
Makes sense, yeah. I've definitely, and I've also been having like, because it's been so cold here, and I watched like High School Musical 2 for the first time recently with some friends, and that's like
Whoa,
th-
the first
this.
time?
Yeah, I just like I've always heard of it, but then my friends are like, "How have you not watched it?" So we watched it, and like that is
Yeah.
like the pinnacle of a summer movie, and now I'm just like having like summer like longing.
Yeah. I feel like it's fitting that we're reading Assassin's Quest right now in the middle of winter when he's, like, going into the mountains and he's getting frostbite and all of that stuff, like,
Oh yeah, I
it's
forgot
so
he gets like
cold
actual
here.
frostbite there. Like, yeah, his fingers are the skin on his fingers are blackened. Like,
Yeah, I was shocked about that, I was like, "Oh, shit." But, like, I love when book environments match, like, real world environments, and I love that that's kind of what is happening here and what's gonna happen in live ships too. Like, it just, I think, helps immerse you even more into the story.
mhm.
Yeah, it fits the vibe.
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. I think this is actually going to be one of our shortest episodes in a while. The
Yeah.
we, which is weird. It's not like we had less to say here. It's just like we mentioned, action is just not as conducive to
Right.
the type of analysis we do. But
Yeah.
regardless, hope y'all enjoyed. Um, and we'll see you next week for chapters 21 through 25 of Assassin's Quest, which will be covering sort of the pre-planning and then start of the actual journey into the mountains towards what we know as Kelsingra, which they know as random elderly sitting.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But yeah, until then, bye.